Sí, todo.
All right, if people could take seats, we will begin. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Cindy Arnson, Director of the Latin American Program here at the Wilson Center. I'm delighted to welcome you to this second session with the principal candidates to succeed Secretary General Jose Miguel Insulza, Secretary General of the OAS. The elections will be held in 2015, and his term expires in May. We are delighted to welcome Eduardo Stein, Dr. Eduardo Stein Barillas, to the Wilson Center. Welcome back, Eduardo. People have copies of his bios, but I will run through a few, I think, of the more important aspects of his background and the qualifications that he brings or would bring to this post. He served as the Vice President of Guatemala from 2004 to 2008, and as Foreign Minister of Guatemala between 1996 and 2000. Anyone who knows the history of Central America knows the transformational role that Eduardo Stein has played in that region. Beginning in the late 1980s and 1990s, he participated in the Esquipulas peace process throughout the region, as well as in the San Jose Dialogue between Central America and the European Union. He also played a critical role in the peace negotiations in Guatemala that led to a definitive end to the internal armed conflict in December 1996 with the signing of the peace accord in that country. He was also the chief of the OAS electoral observation mission in Peru in 2000 that declared the effort by President Alberto Fujimori to be reelected. And then in Honduras, he presided over the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was formed following the ouster of President Mel Zelaya. The commission issued its findings in July 2011. He is now an independent consultant. He serves on numerous boards in this country, in Canada, in the UK. We were also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we had the benefit of his talents in a task force on migration coordinated by the Wilson Center and the Migration Policy Institute when Eduardo served as the Central America co-chair together with the former president of Mexico, Ernesto Zedillo, as well as Carlos Gutierrez, the former U.S. Secretary of Commerce. There are many ambassadors in the room. I would like to acknowledge the ambassador from Guatemala to the White House, Ambassador Ligorria, welcome. Ambassador to the OAS from Mexico is here as well. Rabasa, thank you for joining us. I know that this is always a dangerous exercise because undoubtedly there are people that I will overlook or not recognize. Those that I have neglected to recognize, please know that you're very welcome, and we look forward to having your participation today and in future events. Eduardo.
Muy buenos días, sus excelencias, amigas y amigos. I would like to begin by thanking Cynthia for the invitation. She has asked me to make my comments in English. En atención al país, a la institución que nos alberga y a las calificadas personas que se han reunido hoy para esta conversación. Voy a intentarlo, pero...
If I could just interrupt, excuse me. There are headsets for people who need translation. There will be translation from English to Spanish and then from Spanish to English. I neglected to mention that at the beginning. Excuse me.
En temas muy críticos, sobre todo uno que quiero compartir con ustedes, I am going to turn bilingual.
You are perfectly bilingual, perfectly bilingual.
There are many questions about the actual situation of the OAS and its future, about its obsolescence, about the institutional and financial problems it faces, about its many mandates and the lack of resources to honor them, about its capacity to trigger immediate responses to urgent problems, and at the same time about its ability and technical know-how to help the member states with long-term institutional building and development processes, about the necessary reforms it must undergo to be pertinent in the 21st century, and on and on. And of course, in the face of the next election for the new Secretary General to substitute José Miguel Insulza, there are questions not only about what the candidates to the post are proposing to face up to these formidable challenges and how they intend to do it, but also deeper questions about whether the reform of the organization is still really possible and feasible, and if whomever gets elected is really going to be able to pull the organization out of this mess, quote unquote. What I would like to do today is to comment on a few of those fundamental issues, not all of them, looking at the future of the OAS and the future of our region. And I'll try to do it in two parts. The first part, perhaps a more conceptual and strategic one, and a second part more procedural and operational. Of course, being where we are, a more academic approach should include at least four parts. First, how did we get here? ¿Cómo fue que llegamos hasta aquí? Secondly, a diagnosis of where we are now. ¿Cuál es la verdadera dimensión y complejidad de este desmadre? Thirdly, what needs to be done to move forward, cómo salimos de este agujero, and perhaps a fifth part, who is responsible for what in this operational plan. I want to concentrate in the last two, not disregarding the first two parts. They are absolutely essential to know in order to plan for the future and implement with your feet on the ground. I'm just omitting them today because we know a lot of the diagnostics. And of course, I know that it's the other parts that you're really interested in. What is this guy proposing to do if he gets elected? So, in a first overview, what kind of transition the OAS is facing and what reform is it in dire need of? Because to start, everybody in the body of member states at different levels, but mostly its representatives to the Permanent Council, are convinced that the OAS is in dire need of a profound structural reform to become the hemispheric organization that peoples of the Americas need. As I said, and I want to stress, we know the diagnostics. There is a severe financial crisis in the organization. There is also a tremendous dispersion and abundance of themes and other important issues as well that reflect to the evolution of also how the region as a whole has changed dramatically in the last few years. Fortunately, steps have been taken in order to count on good, solid assessments and recommendations for the profound transformation of the organization. Yet it goes beyond a mere managerial reform. It goes beyond a revamping and adjusting of its organizational structures and functions. Its original Cold War blueprint, as they say in English, doesn't cut it anymore. It needs to be transformed into a 21st century organization. But it requires both a systemic approach and a joint responsibility between the member states and the General Secretariat. In other words, no se trata de continuar el desmadre y mantenerlo de manera ordenada. It's not a haphazard approach. Systemic means all-encompassing, mutually reinforcing. The arbitrary sum of individual national interests, even those that are particular to one individual administration, which more than likely will be countered by the next administration, that sum does not constitute a systemic approach. It's just a disorderly addition of varied interests, many a times that contradict each other, and that within a single hemispheric organization is one of the most central difficulties that must be addressed. But also, the member states have taken head-on the challenge of beginning where it seminally is needed, with the strategic vision and strategic objectives. No new Secretary General has to invent this discussion and this set of strategic objectives. The member states have already run through a lot of their assessment of what the different groups of countries, regions, etc., are undergoing, and about how the OAS of the 21st century should respond to that. And there must be a concerted, dynamic effort between the member states and the General Secretariat. Let me be very simple and blunt about this. No new Secretary General can work miracles on his own or on her own. He or she needs the full political support and the commensurate financial support to pull this through. Without that financial, political support, the reform will never come to be, and whomever gets elected to the post of Secretary General will be drowned in fruitless efforts to salvage a languishing organization that, as one foreign minister put it, in private of course, will become extinct as the dinosaur it has become. Whomever gets elected without the political and financial support of the member states and its active participation in the transformation and retooling of the organization may very well become its caretaker. I'm going to turn bilingual here. La OEA debe ser el catalizador de cambios que promuevan el desarrollo de nuestros pueblos y no la aduana de las ideologías regionales. La voluntad política de sus Estados miembros y sus aportes proporcionales al número de mandatos asignados a la organización marcarán su futuro. No se trata, por tanto, de hacer un ejercicio de sumas y restas para adaptar la importancia de la OEA al presupuesto. Es más bien medir entre todos los representados en el Congreso, en el Consejo Permanente, la importancia de los mandatos vigentes y cuánto vale que los mismos se ejerzan y se cumplan para el beneficio de los pueblos de América, que es a quien nos debemos todos. In English. The OAS must be the catalyzer of changes that promote the development of our peoples, and not the customs office of regional ideologies. The political will of the member states and their proportional contribution to the mandates assigned to the organization will mark its future. It's not a matter of adding or subtracting to adapt a priority the importance of the OAS to the budget. Quite the contrary. It is to assess and to weigh among the member states represented in the Permanent Council the importance of the current mandates and how much is it worth for them to be enforced and implemented for the benefit of the peoples of the Americas, whom are the final reason for our efforts and endeavors. As I said a few minutes ago, fortunately, a new strategic vision for the OAS has been provided by the member states through the Permanent Council. They have frequently expressed their views and preoccupations on the situation of the organization and the problems it faces, and on the challenges that lie ahead. Reform proposals, matter of fact, began to be put forward by Secretary General Cesar Gaviria. This is the direct antecedent of the 4 pillars that have been amply discussed and approved by the member states. Secretary General Jose Miguel Insulza, in its first mandate, made a formal written proposal to the member states for profound and far-reaching reforms. For some reason, it never caught, as it is being done today, but there is a solid antecedent in there. Member states started where it should start, taking their time to explore, discuss, and agree on a strategic vision. And from then on, the next order of business will be a similar process on its implementation. En América Latina, sobre todo, nosotros somos campeones en planear, pero flojos en implementar. No English translation for that one.
Not needed.
So, all of the member states agree that the new strategic vision demands a revamping of the organizational structure, of its procedural practices, and a restating of its objectives and operational agendas. The OAS, therefore, needs to be a solid, mature, and responsible institution that could project hope to the new generations for a united hemisphere. We should not strive for, I don't know the word in English for this one, un palenque, donde se pelean los gallos, or una plaza de toros, en donde se matan a los animales. The OAS should be the platform to discuss and agree upon strategic objectives for all of the region, and not just to meet for bickering amongst ourselves. We would intend to work hand in hand with all of the member states to address another of the difficulties that the organization seems to be facing, and that is a growing disparity between what the General Secretariat does and the member states do, for reasons that could be commented upon, if you wish, during the question and answer period. As a tendency, Secretary Generals, as they move forward in the agenda, tend to become more and more independent because they feel the constraint of the member states in the type of responses they need to implement to face up to the crisis or the different processes that the organization confronts. And yet, the member states feel that sometimes the Secretary Generals are on the loose. So there are some specific changes. What does this guy intend to do if he gets elected? Well, I don't have answers for all of the questions. But I think there is a solid ground to start working from day one in very concrete things. And I'm going to gradually move into the second part. Which specific changes, of course, the member states make the final judgments on what we do as an organization. However, I'm convinced that the leadership of the OAS can ensure that issues and decisions are brought to the attention of the inter-American community so that we can do our best as a region to uphold the values and principles to which member states have committed themselves. Coming from a country and a region that faced fierce armed conflict in the 70s and 80s, and we had to sit with the adversaries, the guerrilla organizations, at least in Nicaragua, Salvador, and Guatemala, to come to grips with the problems we were facing and agree on acuerdos de paz. I am absolutely convinced that the OAS should not be an excluding organization, no una organización excluyente. Necesitamos a todos en la mesa. The next Secretary General must take a proactive role in shaping a regional consensus on the organization's essential mission of defending representative democracy and human rights. I'll come back later on the human rights issues. Secretary General can also help set an ambitious agenda for the premier organization of the Americas that brings all of us together as sovereign equals for a constructive dialogue on pressing issues. I also come from a region where we have had already an integration process that has produced important economic advancements for Central America. And that hasn't represented at all an obstacle to be part of higher, wider, and more numerous organizational structures. We do have our own integration process that we have made efforts to make it rhyme with the hemispheric, continental, and the international organization that Central American countries belong to. So we should use the OAS as an instrument to set bold, new objectives on improving the lives of our people and making our region more competitive in the global economy. But also, we need a thorough review of our resources, activities, and priorities so that the OAS concentrates its efforts on doing very well while others cannot do. Si me lo permiten, deberíamos estar más preocupados por los contenidos estratégicos de la agenda y los objetivos que ello implica que por invitaciones. About the human rights specifically, I want to be very candid about the many restlessness that we see in different regions on these issues. And I personally, I'm all in favor of advancing what many of us think to be one of the most emblematic and fundamental parts of our inter-American system, which is our human rights system. Quite a few of us, though, are preoccupied that some voices arguing that they want to strengthen the inter-American human rights system, want to impose severe limitations on it. That would be disastrous. I come from a region where the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, because of the swiftness with which it acted, saved individual lives, entire families, and even at some point, populations as a whole. So if we are going to impinge upon our human rights structures and procedures, it should be in effect to make steps forward in making it even a better system than we have today. And in this regard, let me mention a few words on the Caribbean. They have indeed taken very seriously those efforts to modernize. And we have seen how the long-term vision of the Caribbean countries have coalesced in order to include modifications not only in their internal rulings to accommodate their legislation to these strategic and important objectives, but also to make changes in their own constitutions to comply. So this is something that we should carefully look. Mostly the smaller countries that have, like my own, weak institutional scaffoldings, mostly in the area of justice and human rights. Every member state, of course, if we consider the Human Rights Commission and the OAS Office of Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression as the OAS, one of the OAS's most valuable agencies, every member state has the right to be heard on these issues. And my impression is that the proposals made by a number of governments were thoroughly and are thoroughly and vigorously being debated. Some governments have expressed, as you well know, specific concerns about the Commission and its reach and mandates, and a good number of member states have made very clear that they consider the Commission's work one of the most important contributions of the inter-American system. I believe that the Commission, which was one of the first entities created under the OAS Charter, has a very important job to do. It is certainly not the role of the Secretary General to interfere with how they carry out their mission. Their independence is part of their value. And let's get a bit more personal. If I were to get elected, my role as Secretary General would be to defend the importance of these organizations and of the binding human rights treaties they represent. Let me move forward and touch on some of the specific issues in the agenda, and with this we will open up for your questions, comments, furiosas críticas, and what have you. I think that the OAS has tried to reach out to the youth dimension of our hemisphere. But maybe we need to step forward in a more vigorous way. We have to really try, as an organization, to speak to the future of those generations. In several countries, like my own, we still speak about the demographic bonus because we still have muy altos índices de crecimiento demográfico. If we speak about the three countries with the gravest of citizen security problems, Honduras, Salvador, y Guatemala, we also have a very young population. 70% of our population in the three countries is below 30 years of age. Not all the countries are the same in the Americas, but we do need to have a more coherent set of forward-looking objectives that speak loudly, not only through the digital media or the social networks, but speak loudly about the future of our region and the values that we uphold. There's also a matter of gender. I would dare to say that we should move forward in a very strong fashion here too, and maybe aimed at by, for example, 2018, half of our representations in the countries will be in the hands of women representatives. And lastly, the theme of science and technology should be taken advantage of in its most transparent expression for the region. If we do not link the element of education, science and technology as one of our strategic objectives with the rest, we will not be able to properly address the fight against corruption, organized crime, and of course the strengthening of our demographic institutions. In the fight against corruption, you know that there is a very loud societal cry in all of the Americas. We used to say in Latin America, not anymore. Most populations in the hemisphere are complaining about the way in which their own political system is working and about the breakup in the methods of representation, about the standstills that are occurring more often than not in our representative institutions like Congress, Senates, etc., and how it has become almost impossible for any executive to really run the mandate they receive in the polls in a swift manner because Congress stops everything. And in some countries, the corruption and the infection of organized crime has crept into public spaces and private spaces, not leaving Congresses untainted. This is something in which also the organization should work together, hand in hand with the member states, and to create even more aggressive programs to strengthen in their own democratic scaffolding and with strict respect for their own internal legislation, strengthen their own institutions. So there you have it. How do we get out of this mess? Well, there are some guidelines that I hope I have run through, not in a haphazard way. There are many more issues that could be commented on, but I would not want to abuse of your time. Quiero terminar reiterando mis agradecimientos a las personas que han hecho este diálogo posible, a Cinti en particular, a todas y todos ustedes que se han querido acercar esta mañana a conversar sobre el tema. Hay una serie de espacios de actuación con los que me gustaría terminar cerrando esta intervención. What would be the initial steps? Institutionalize the decision-making process in the organization's general secretariat. this is working in a very, I would say, loose fashion. Secondly, strengthen, enhance, or even establish a dialogue mechanism effectively inclusive with the permanent representatives of the member states. Thirdly, link the political directives that come out of the presidential summits of the Americas to the strategic planning process within the organization and initiate a process to transform the OAS in the true coordinator of the Inter-American system. Fourth, lead the prioritization process or prioritization process of existing mandates. Miren, se hizo una limpia, una selección. The organization, through their member states, discarded a lot of the mandates that had already expired in their dates. And even then, there are 757 extant mandates in the organization without a proper budget to honor them. 757 is not only a Boeing design, it's a major institutional disaster if we don't get our act together. 5, take effective control of budget execution and expenditures with modernized accountability and transparency procedures. There is a very solid recent report on that regard with several very sound recommendations of an analysis that was made throughout the organization. And 6th, invigorate, enhance, develop, whatever verb you want, and take effective control of the information flows within the Secretariat as well as between the Secretariat and the member states. These are very concrete steps forward to implement what we've been sharing with you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Thanks to Christine Zeno, our program associate, to Alejandra Argueta, working with us now as an intern, who will be passing the microphone around to those of you who have comments or questions. I'd simply like to continue in the dangerous practice of recognizing people. Former U.S. Ambassador to the OAS, Hattie Babbitt, who is here, Uruguayan OAS Ambassador Hugo Cairuz. Any others that I have missed, again, my apologies. Please perhaps introduce yourselves. The floor is open for comments, questions, English or Spanish. Start here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's on.
I'm Emilio Rabasa, embajador de México ante la OEA. I first want to welcome Cynthia Sarnon's dialogue with Dr. Stein and the Wilson Center for giving us this important opportunity to hear his thoughts on the OAS. We have heard your contendants' ideas, Mr. Almagro's, but we hadn't heard yours, so we welcome that for the first time we are having a thorough explanation of your platform and your position. Having said that, I have two direct questions. Talking about this mess, I quote you, desmadre, that you mentioned, I would like to know if in case you are elected Secretary General, you would be prepared to use part of your political capital to resolve once and for all a major structural problem, the quota system. It is not possible that 4 countries cover 98% of the budget. Let me be bilingual. 4 países cubren el 98% del presupuesto regular y 31 países el 2%. Esto genera una debilidad financiera tremenda en la organización porque basta que 1 o 2 de estos países se atrasen en su pago de cuotas y ponen a la institución en problemas. Y ahorita acaba de suceder. 2 de ellos se atrasaron y el secretario general tuvo que pedir autorización al Consejo para solicitar un crédito para pagar sueldos, salarios de los trabajadores. A ese extremo puede llegar la vulnerabilidad económica de la organización si no corregimos el sistema de cuotas. Esa es una pregunta. Y la otra pregunta, doctor, es, quisiera saber su posición sobre el tema Cuba. Y en relación con Cuba, la próxima cumbre del año entrante. Muchas gracias.
Sure, go ahead.
Embajador, muchas gracias. No solo por la importancia, pertinencia y precisión de las preguntas, 2 tiros al marco peligrosos, sino porque somos conscientes que usted coordinó precisamente este esfuerzo para recorrer el proceso de elaboración de la visión estratégica de la OEA del futuro. Mire, a su primera pregunta, sí, definitivamente, quien quiera que saliera electo, necesariamente tiene que enfrentar este sistema de las contribuciones financieras a la organización. Lamentablemente, por cómo está estructurada en su sistema legal, la Secretaría General solo puede proponer a los Estados miembros formas de salirle al paso a este problema, pero coincido plenamente con su certero análisis, plenamente con el riesgo que esto representa y por supuesto plenamente con la necesidad de revisarlo. Sobre el tema de Cuba, bueno, la Organización de Estados Americanos en su Asamblea General de San Pedro Sula en 2009 levantaron la sanción que expulsaba a ese país de la organización. A partir de entonces, Cuba, digamos, si quisiera, pudiera reincorporarse a la organización, honrando, según recuerdo, los términos de la resolución, el compromiso al que todos los Estados miembros se someten al adherirse a la Carta y, de alguna manera, aunque la Carta Democrática no es un documento mandatorio, pero sí es un documento, digamos, que políticamente los Estados miembros firmaron aquella fatídica fecha del 11 de septiembre. Pero para ir más directamente al tema contemporáneo sobre, si entendí bien la pregunta, la Cumbre de las Américas que se celebrará en Panamá el 9 de abril del año próximo. Yo creo que invitar o no invitar a Cuba ya no es el issue. Cuba está invitada, el gobierno panameño ha hecho una cuestión de procedimiento del tema. No este gobierno, a pesar de que el presidente Martinelli dijo que él no había tenido nada que ver, la prensa panameña le exhibió videos en donde él declaró que habían invitado al gobierno cubano a la próxima cumbre. Este gobierno, sin embargo, ha tomado muy en serio el esfuerzo de dar ese paso hacia la inclusión plena, pero para que se discuta en realidad a fondo a lo interno de la organización, entre todos, sin excluir a nadie, cuáles son los objetivos que nos proponemos cumplir en el futuro, incluyendo los temas de los compromisos en derechos humanos. No me quiero poner pesado, embajador, en este sentido, ni irrespetuoso, pero sería muy lamentable que en esta cumbre o en esta edición de la cumbre, si el gobierno cubano decide aceptar la invitación y participar, otros gobiernos decidan no estar. Resquebrajaría el principio de inclusión que todos estamos buscando y también la posibilidad de entendernos en la misma mesa. Quisiera aludir a un ejemplo mínimo, pero muy en el corazón del pueblo guatemalteco, arriesgándonos a llegar al límite de una violación constitucional. Nos sentamos a la mesa con los comandantes guerrilleros para llegar a unos acuerdos de paz que nos permitieran superar los problemas de la guerra interna, y se logró. Y se logró con tanto éxito que no conocemos un solo caso de un asesinato político posterior a la firma de los acuerdos de paz, ni en los mandos militares, ni en los mandos de la guerrilla. La violencia que ahora enfrentamos, usted sabe bien, tiene otro origen y otras expresiones. En este sentido, solo lo pongo como un minúsculo referente de la conveniencia de sentarnos todos a la misma mesa.
Let's take, excuse me, 2 questions here and in the back.
Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Graciela Reyes. Yo soy independent scholar. Dr. Stein, how do you see the role of the OAS in the support of the after 2015 development agenda and the work of the UN in the area of democracy and development?
I am not sure I understood the question. Could you repeat?
En castellano, si quiere.
Sí. How do you see the role of the Organization of American States in the support of the after 2015 development agenda of the UN?
Se refiere a los retos del milenio. Okay.
Okay, and there was a hand, I think, we'll take the one in the back, and then we'll come back to Christine.
Hi, I'm Sebastiano Fulci, ambassador to Permanent Observer of Italy to the OAS. So, Dr. Stein, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. It's been very informative. There is one question, one issue that keeps being repeated at the OAS, which is how to increase the relevance of the organization at the eyes of the populations, of the hemisphere's population, but also abroad, in Europe, for instance. So I have a question. I'd like to know if you think that involving more the parliaments in the hemisphere would not help. I'd like to make a reference to an organism that exists inside the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe includes, as you may know, also Russia and Central American countries and so on, but has less competences than the OAS if we compare it as an organization. What is interesting is that it has also a committee of parliamentarians, which means that 2 parliamentarians of each country, there are about 43 member states, 2 parliamentarians are dealing with the Council of Europe issues for a month, for a whole month, and concentrate only on that. So this means that the parliaments of these countries focus on those issues that are dealt at the Council of Europe. And of course, have a tendency to support also the budget that is given to the Council of Europe. So I was wondering, if such, I wouldn't call it a model, but an experience at the Council of Europe could not be in some way of inspiration also in the OAS. For example, asking the parliaments of the hemisphere to dedicate more themselves to OAS issues. Thanks by designing, of course, 2 parliamentarians or more. Thanks.
Okay, and we'll take one more here. Christina?
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Cindy for organizing this and for giving this importance to the OAS competition for Secretary General. My name is Christina Cern. I spent more than 3 decades in the human rights system at the OAS. And my concern is that the Inter-American System for the Protection of Human Rights is in crisis, which is why we've had this long-term analysis and study of how to strengthen it. And I think one of the main elements of this crisis is that it has become a Latin American system and not an inter-American system. The U.S. is the only founding member of the OAS that has not ratified the American Convention on Human Rights. And much of the English-speaking Caribbean and, of course, Canada are also not parties to this treaty. Also, following the previous speaker's analogy to the Council of Europe, the Council of Europe requires every state that becomes a member of the Council of Europe to buy into the human rights treaties of the European system. This has been discussed in the OAS, but nothing has moved on this issue. In my view, Venezuela denounced the American Convention in part because of the different obligations that different sets of countries have assumed, and the fact that the U.S. has assumed, among the least, the U.S. and Canada, has had no cost for the U.S. in the system. And I'm wondering if among these bold initiatives you're thinking about, you have some strategy for making this more of an inter-American system. Also, you mentioned just in response to one of the previous questions that you didn't think the Inter-American Democratic Charter had any mandatory effect. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. Before turning the floor back to Eduardo, I'd also like to recognize finally the Guatemalan ambassador to the OAS, Ambassador Argueta. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Regarding the millennial objectives, los objetivos del milenio, ya en el seno de la ONU se ha avanzado bastante en dibujar qué viene después. En el caso de América Latina en particular, varios países afortunadamente han logrado cumplir la mayoría de las metas del milenio, pero hay algunos países que todavía exhiben rezagos importantes. Quizás lo que la Organización de Estados Americanos podría contribuir como una organización hemisférica al esfuerzo mundial es en la actualización y el aterrizaje de algunas de las tareas que pueden ayudar a ciertos países a caminar más rápido en lograr esas metas que nos propusimos todos hace algunos años, pero también en comprender mejor la interrelación que en la práctica guardan varios de esos ámbitos, que solo en años recientes se ha ido comprendiendo a cabalidad y se han ido incluso descubriendo nuevas dificultades que cuando se acordaron las metas del milenio tal vez no eran tan aparentes. Voy a mencionar solo una. En varios países de América Latina existe aún un problema no resuelto y yo diría una tensión creciente en algunos de ellos entre los gobiernos locales y el gobierno central. Y de hecho se ha manifestado en una buena parte de nuestros territorios una especie de rebelión plebeya que congrega gobiernos locales o municipales, organizaciones campesinas, indígenas, grupos ambientalistas, iglesias, en una agenda linda, que es el control de los territorios, pero que le disputa al gobierno central las decisiones estratégicas en lo nacional y aquellas que debe negociar en lo regional. Por ejemplo, en el tema de la energía. Nosotros no seremos capaces de honrar varios de estos compromisos de desarrollo en las metas del milenio si no resolvemos más de la mitad de los países de América Latina nuestros déficits energéticos y la manera de aprovisionarnos en un futuro muy corto de energía accesible a la mayoría de la población. Ambassador Fuji, the ideas and the experience that the Council of Europe could provide to Latin America is of course important, but it would need the modification of the Charter on the one hand. But stepping aside from the legal aspects of it and the more institutional aspects of it, a lot of our congresses, senates, representative organs in our governments are very poorly regarded by the populations. Let me switch to Spanish for a second. Los congresos son los peor valorados de los entes de gobierno en todas las encuestas de Latino Barómetro. The congressional institutions are really bad news for most of the population. So it would be highly unpopular to begin by incorporating graciously in a fashion that we don't quite know how it could be, representatives from congresses in this type of agenda trend-setting, agenda-facing. It would require more of a political laboratory to face up to these things. Having said that, however, I think that definitely the OAS is an organization that has been losing presence and visibility in the populations at large because people don't feel it's pertinent at all. It is like other organizations created by politicians, things to send people that we don't want to have near in our own countries, or that's the kind of opinions that surface in many of the polls. So we have to be careful on those things, and I would say that the OAS should also begin an aggressive program of showing how relevant a lot of its work is for the populations at large. Regarding the crisis of the Inter-American human rights system, you yourself provided the answer to the questions. I find it difficult, personally, to reverse the several decade-old trend of Canada and the United States of staying away from becoming full members of the San Jose Pact. But but we can give it a try. Or at least foster the type of discussion that will make these things surface, not in a finger-pointing way, but in a more constructive way. However, I think that this discussion should come to very concrete, solid, constructive agreements on the part of all of the member states for the future. I don't know if I left some details out. Oh, yes. You wanted... Well, the Inter-American Democratic Charter was signed by all of the member states on September 11 in Lima, Peru. Having been the Peruvian government its main proponent and impulsor. But there are no provisions in the Carta Democrática Interamericana to enforce what the member states signed. It's a matter of individual political will of the member states to adhere to those principles and objectives. And I took the liberty of quoting what the Caribbean states have done, because they have progressed probably more than any region in the Americas in how to include human rights objectives into their own legislation and even into their own constitutions.
I see a hand back here, a hand all the way in the back. Ambassador Ligoria, one here. Okay, we'll take 4.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Stein. Thank you to the Wilson Center. My name's Sarah Danish. I'm with the International Republican Institute. I wanted to recall your comments on education, 2 specific questions. What do you see as some of the structural challenges facing the countries in the region in terms of advancing education? And then secondly, and then this is something I struggle with in our work, is where is the space for civic education alongside education in the fundamentals, science, technology, literacy? So how you view the role of civic education as part of broader education agenda? Thank you.
Okay, in the back. Alejandra, back there. All the way in the yeah.
Beatriz Juez, de la agencia alemana DPA. Tengo 2 preguntas. La primera, ya sé que es un poco difícil hablar de uno mismo, pero ¿qué cualidades cree usted que tiene para ser el candidato ideal para el puesto? Y una segunda pregunta es si el hecho de que en la historia de la OEA solo haya habido un secretario general centroamericano y que haya durado tan poco tiempo, ¿cree que puede pesar en la balanza, para que la balanza se mueva hacia su lado?
Okay, Ambassador Ligoria.
Que la balanza se mueva, perdón.
Incline hacia su lado.
Okay. Embajador.
Embajador Ligorría de Guatemala, buenos días. Doctor Stein, muy interesante presentación la suya, no sobra decir que lo admiramos y lo apreciamos mucho, no solo como Estado, sino en lo personal todos nosotros los guatemaltecos que estamos presentes. Hay un concepto muy del siglo XXI que usted presentó hoy, que me parece sería muy importante elaborar un poco más sobre él, cuando usted dice que no quisiera ver en la OEA, a la OEA convertida en una oficina de aduanas del debate ideológico hemisférico. Gracias.
And finally up here.
Gracias, doctor Stein. Mi nombre es Rubén Barrera, de la agencia de noticias Notimex de México. Tengo 2 preguntas rápidas. La primera es hasta qué punto considera usted que la polarización que hay en la región sea un enorme obstáculo para, como usando sus palabras textuales, acabar con este desmadre y poner orden en la OEA. Y digo, esta polarización se ve en este momento en que hay grupos de estados, grupos de países que no quieren a otros países refiriendo rápidamente el caso de la CELAC, por ejemplo, donde no se quieren a Canadá y a Estados Unidos. Y la segunda es, si se me antoja preguntarle si a raíz de toda esta exposición que hizo usted sobre los males y beneficios de la OEA, pareciera usted que está dibujando una organización que no tiene brújula, y quisiera saber si ese es el caso, si considera usted que la OEA es una organización al garete, sin brújula alguna.
The challenges in education, as anybody who has worked professionally and politically in the field knows, stem basically from three origins, and more or less in different dosages or doses, they are present in several of our countries. The OAS could indeed strengthen its efforts to help the member states that do require so to address some of these issues. One has to do with the way in which educational systems that have become so rigid in time do not respond to the needs of the population at large in today's world. Everybody speaks of educational reform. We've had in the Inter-American Dialogue a formidable program throughout several years in several countries in Latin America that have tried to set aside the political infighting surrounding this obsolescence or lack of relevance of educational systems and try to work in a twofold fashion, one towards the modification and reform of the curricular contents, and the other to train teachers. The second, the training of teachers, has proven to be the most cumbersome and convoluted political problem in most of the countries, because normally the teachers' unions in Latin America have become very powerful unions that do not want to change because they don't want to change the benefits that they have accumulated over time. And the adoption of new educational technologies and the new digital media that have become so inexpensive in order to reach remote rural areas is always one of the stepping stones of these reform processes. There are very successful experiences in different Latin American countries from which other countries can learn. So it's not a very expensive proposition for the OAS to foster this exchange of so-called good practices. Secondly, there are some countries, like mine, that have a considerable amount of indigenous populations with different languages. In the case of Guatemala, depends on which our anthropologist counts, it's 21 or 22 different languages aside from Spanish. That is a formidable challenge in itself, because in some cases and instances, in places like Ecuador, like Bolivia, like even Chile, Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, of course, Guatemala, to a lesser extent, Nicaragua, there are populations that speak a specific language that would not fill the national soccer stadium. They are so tiny that to think of an entire educational system to be serviced in that language, and most of which do not have a tradition of reading and writing in formal terms, but they are oral cultures and oral traditions, is an ongoing discussion in which there are many valuable propositions being tried, but no one has come up with a golden rule to address successfully this. Thirdly, part of contemporary challenges in education is how to prepare the young people to be immediately tuned and able in a fast-changing society that demands better and better qualifications nationally, regionally, and internationally, and yet amidst economies that cannot provide for jobs for those youngsters. In my country, as in other countries, in my country, close to 250,000 youngsters come out into the working force every year at a high school graduate age, and only 75,000 of them find jobs. So that has nurtured gangs, that has nurtured illegal migration to try to come here, by the way. This is a very complex problem that goes well beyond the educational capacities of the countries. DPA questions. A cabinet maker, a woodworker, can talk about his or her dexterities in making fine furniture, but only by seeing the furniture he or she does can you really tell if he or she is dexterous enough. That's a problem. I would not want to waste your time in talking about my personal qualifications. My public service record is public, available. You can tell by whatever I've done and the mistakes I've made as well, if I could, in effect, be up to the task. But I would want to insist on the very first idea that I shared with you this morning. It is a joint effort between the General Secretariat and the member states. No person elected to this post is going to work miracles unless it has the support and active participation of the member states. There was a second question, though, that it had to do, I believe, with only President Rodríguez having been...
Sí, el hecho de que solo haya habido en la historia de la OEA un secretario general centroamericano y que haya durado tan poco podría ayudarle en su candidatura para que la balanza se incline hacia su lado.
Mire, con toda franqueza y, por supuesto, con el mayor de los respetos, yo no creo que debería ser un elemento de comparación de a quién le toca por región esta vez. Yo creo que la organización y la región necesitan una reflexión responsable de ver quién creen que puede estar a la altura de los desafíos que se han planteado. No importa su nacionalidad, porque tendrá por necesidad que ser un secretario de una organización hemisférica para servir a los intereses de todo el hemisferio. Sobre la pregunta del embajador Ligorría acerca de no ser la aduana de las ideologías regionales, sino más bien una plataforma de acuerdos. No quiero ser irrespetuoso con las personas que nos compartieron esto, pero un alto funcionario de la administración norteamericana nos preguntaba hace algunos meses ¿por qué Estados Unidos tiene que seguir siendo miembro de la OEA, pagando casi el 60% del presupuesto, si la OEA solo se junta para darnos palo? Es mi traducción libre.
Muy aceptada.
En realidad es una pregunta legítima, alude a la primera inquietud planteada aquí por el embajador Rabasa, de una disparidad muy grande de cómo participan los estados financieramente en la organización. Pero el ángulo que quise compartir y que con agudeza y sin perdonarme la vida el embajador recoge, en efecto, la OEA va a una muerte segura si se constituye solamente en una plataforma de peleas ideológicas. Nosotros deberíamos buscar los ámbitos en donde esas disputas ideológicas pueden airearse, los hay en abundancia, sin necesidad de perjudicar una organización que debe existir para lo contrario, para lograr acuerdos en torno a objetivos comunes que nos unan como región y para entendernos como región con otras regiones del planeta. Y la pregunta del señor de Notimex sobre si la polarización que vivimos es un obstáculo para acabar con el desmadre. Sí, sí lo es. Pero precisamente y emparentada con la inquietud del embajador Ligorría, enderezaríamos nuestra caminata por una vereda equivocada si lo único que logramos es continuar o peor aún profundizar los antagonismos y no recoger, que es lo que cualquiera persona que ha tenido experiencia en mediación sabe, recoger aquellos elementos que son comunes a ambas partes antagónicas y comenzar por ahí. Si comenzamos por lo que más nos divide, eso no va a caminar. Si comenzamos por nuestros intereses que más nos unen, eso podría ir rebajando los antagonismos. Lo de la brújula, yo le diría que todos están con su brújula en la mano. El problema es que no tenemos un solo norte magnético, sino que cada uno tiene su brújula, pero le pone su imán enfrente. Y de esa manera estamos siempre buscando una agenda de intereses particulares que no facilita el hermanarse más amplia y dinámicamente en intereses comunes, que los tenemos, están escritos en nuestros compromisos y ahora además los Estados miembros nos han dado un nuevo blueprint, un mapa estratégico para seguir. Quitémonos los imanes de enfrente, pues, y van a ver cómo todas las brújulas apuntan al mismo norte.
I actually have a question, which has to do with the various roles that you've played within the OAS, including the head of the observer mission in Peru. The defense of sovereignty is a core principle held very dearly by Latin American and Caribbean countries. And yet, and the Inter-American Democratic Charter is designed for the kinds of interruptions of the democratic process, such as what happened in in Honduras or would happen in the event of a military coup. Do you envision any role for the United States, for the Organization of American States? The U.S. does have a role, but for the Organization of American States in defending democratic practice along the lines of representative democracy that you outlined at the beginning of your talk. And then perhaps we'll take one last question. I believe we're out of time. Sure, Michael.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Eduardo. I have a question on the, one of the things that I think a lot of people see as having been valuable that the OAS has done recently is its study on the drug issue. And your government and your president is also identified with this issue in terms of really calling for a look for alternative approaches. The OAS has done this study, they've done these scenarios. What is the next step on this issue, and does the OAS have a role to play in the next phase in terms of really trying to come up with a more constructive approach on the drug question? And to what extent do you see that there is a basis for consensus among Latin American governments, or is this another issue where everybody's kind of pointing in different directions?
Cynthia, I definitely endorse the notion that the OAS indeed has a role to play in the defense of democratic practices. In fact, many of the actions within the Inter-American human rights structures and procedures have to do with the lack of democratic practices in some national situations in which persons, families, or organizations have not been able to have their own national justice be responsive with equity, con igualdad y equidad to their demands. But we're always working on a very thin line. And this has to do both to the organizational capacities that are awarded to some of its institutional parts to intervene or to react or to take preventive measures, as well as, and this is perhaps the most debated and most delicate of issues, las facultades que le dan al secretario general o a la secretaria general. And you mentioned the case of Honduras. The member states, through their permanent council, reacted immediately to the overthrow of President Zelaya. And they sent Secretary General Insulza to Tegucigalpa, pero con la prohibición de que hablara con ninguno de los golpistas. So, what was his role? What was he to do in Tegucigalpa if he couldn't talk to the people that were in the provisional government? He couldn't act as a mediator with that prohibition in his hands. I don't think that was a very intelligent decision, although it was a reacción rotunda de los Estados miembros en contra de lo que entendían ser una clara violación a los principios democráticos en contra de un presidente legítimamente electo por voto popular. I am not neutral because I presided over the Truth Commission that tried to unravel this mess in Honduras. And whomever has the patience to read even the digest, which is only 50 pages of the report, you can see that, as we say in Spanish, de lado y lado se repartió bocado. President Zelaya contravened specific orders of and instructions of the Supreme Court, went against Congress, and went against its own security structures. By Thursday of that week, it was 28th of the month, the Honduran government ceased to work. Each of the independent powers was trying to survive on its own. And so, how to unravel the mess without taking everybody to justice for having violated their own mandates, because all of Congress should be in jail, all of the judges of the Supreme Court should be in jail, and of course, what was the outcome there? But the faculties given, or the task given to a Secretary General of the OAS to go there to do what if he couldn't talk and mediate with those who deposed Zelaya is a very good illustration of what should not be done. I personally, of course, respect the decision of the member states to reject very strongly what had happened, but to risk the prestige of the organization, not only of the Secretary General, sending him to an impossible task there, because what they asked of him was, tell the Honduran authorities to bring President Zelaya back from Costa Rica and reinstate him in the presidency was a bad joke. I'm sorry, but that's what it was. I think that, therefore, it is necessary for this permanent linkage and dialogue between the General Secretariat and the member states to create even better mecanismos de prevención, de alerta temprana, to foresee the crisis. This had been brewing since January in Tegucigalpa, and several of us sent messages to Washington warning about what was coming to all of us, because the region was hard hit in Central America by this mishap. We should indeed task our institution with swifter capacities and get clearer linkages between the member states and the General Secretary. Michael, I think, yes, the OAS has done already very important work for the region. The long and cumbersome process of creating the different scenarios, aside from the very good diagnostic papers that were prepared a year and a half ago, they have done good groundwork from where to work onwards. But also here and there, different sprouts of concrete experiences have been or have begun to be tried out in different countries, in the United States as well, but by some of the states that have legalized the use of marijuana, for example, for certain purposes, etc. But I think the OAS still has a long ways to go in allowing for a wider and deeper discussion that has even newer medical and other types of evidence available. One thing that was not available for the elaboration of the scenarios, or at least with not enough information, what's the situation in our jail systems. It was fragmentary and limited information. And since gradually it has become apparent that in a lot of instances of criminal procedures, the focus has been within los presidios, que muchos de los esquemas de crimen organizado que trafican y distribuyen droga son administrados desde los presidios. También allí tenemos un law enforcement issue that needs deeper understanding and better data.
Bueno, we're out of time. Eduardo Stein, thank you for your very structured analysis and presentation, and also for your openness and taking all of these sometimes very difficult questions. Thanks to all of you. We look forward to future rounds of this debate. Please join me in thanking Eduardo Stein for